He threw a bag of trash at me right at my feet like I was just another piece of litter on the sidewalk. And he did it in broad daylight, wearing a white police uniform while the city watched and said nothing. All because I was a black man in a wheelchair holding sunflowers. He didn't ask my name. He didn't care that I was a decorated war veteran. But what he didn't know was that the man he mocked had one more battle to fight, and this time it wasn't overseas. He threw a fast food bag at my feet like I was the sidewalk, like I wasn't a man, like I wasn't human. The soda inside splashed. The grease bled into the concrete, and the smell of cold fries and cheap disrespect rose into the hot afternoon air. The man who did it stood tall in his freshly ironed white police uniform badge, gleaming like a warning flare on his chest. He didn't just throw garbage, he threw a message. One that said, "You don't belong here." One that said, "Pick it up, boy." Behind him stood his partner, younger, quieter arms, folded, not intervening, not objecting, just watching. And to the left of them, both in the shadow of City Hall, was the camera on a pole, watching everything and yet protecting nothing. Not me. I didn't move. I didn't bend down. I didn't flinch. I just looked up slowly from my wheelchair and met his eyes. For a brief second, the street noise faded. The cars silenced. Even the birds stopped fluttering. My hand, weathered and scarred from the battlefield of another lifetime, gripped the worn rubber armrest. I blinked once, he smirked and said, "Don't make me call in a cleanup for you, old man. I am Sergeant Isaac Roman. You, Ace, Army, retired Bronze Star recipient, disabled. In service, left leg, lost to an IED in Kandahar. I live in a modest apartment on Auburn Street, a block from this intersection. I don't cause trouble. I go to the VA hospital on Tuesdays. I volunteer at the food pantry on Fridays. I wheel myself through this town with the quiet dignity of someone who has seen what real chaos looks like and decided peace is worth protecting. But peace can't survive in a place where cruelty wears a badge and walks free. What led up to this moment? Not much. Not enough. I had just bought flowers from Miss Elaine's stand on Lincoln Avenue. Sunflowers, bright, proud summer in a stem. I was headed toward the community center where I read to kids in the afternoons. That's when the cruiser pulled up behind me. Lights off, no siren. Just slow-rolling tension on 4 tires. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't say I had done anything wrong. He just leaned out and asked, "Who let you park your ass here?" I thought he was joking. I smiled. The same Constitution that lets you talk to me like that. I said, that's when he got out. That's when he threw the trash. His name was Officer Brent Mallory. I'd seen him around young square-jawed, the kind of cop that walks like the whole city owes him money. I'd heard stories, of course, black teenagers pulled over for walking too fast. Single moms cited for noise because their baby cried too long. But no one had ever thrown garbage at me before. Not even when I was in uniform. Not even in the Deep South. The people on the sidewalk saw it. An older white couple across the street gasped. A teenage boy pulled out his phone, recorded for 10 seconds, then hesitated and put it back. A mother with her daughter veered away, whispering, "Don't look." They all saw it, and they all looked away. But something inside me didn't look away. Something ancient. Something buried under years of holding my tongue and folding my pride into polite smiles. My grandfather, who was denied service in World War II because of his skin. My father, who was jailed in Selma for marching with a dream. And me, who left a leg on foreign soil, so my countrymen could still choose right from wrong. We were all sitting in that wheelchair. I remember the bag at my feet. I remember the way the soda leaked toward my tire like a slow insult. I remember the silence that followed the way Officer Mallory's partner looked away, as if ashamed, but not enough to act. I remember Officer Mallory's voice full of mock command. "You're littering, sir. You planning on picking that up, or should I write you a citation?" Then he laughed. Like I was a joke. Like my uniform, my medals, my limp were all punchlines. I didn't answer. I leaned forward, reached down not for the trash but for the corner of the bouquet that had fallen. A sunflower petal stuck to the concrete slick with cola. I picked it up. I looked up. I said 4 words I hadn't planned on saying that day. 4 words that didn't sound angry. Just honest. Just tired. You don't know me. That stopped him. Just for a second. He opened his mouth to say something else. Probably another line. Probably another dig. But I rolled away. Not fast. Not afraid. Just done. I left the trash where it lay. Let the wind take it. Let the city clean up after its own shame. But as I turned the corner, a voice called after me. His voice not angry this time, just confused. "What did you say?" I didn't answer. I had said enough. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of my apartment, staring at the flag on the shelf, folded triangle. Tucked beside it a picture of my unit, 8 of us in desert camo, grinning arms thrown over shoulders. 5 of them didn't come back. I did. I came back to this. I thought of calling the precinct. I thought of posting online. I thought of doing what the world says to do. Be civil. File a report. Trust the system. But then I thought about all the others who had filed reports. All the others who had trusted. And I knew I needed more than paperwork. I needed the truth. I needed people to see. I needed them to feel. The next morning, I wheeled back to that same corner. I sat there from sunrise to noon with a sign in my lap. Just cardboard and Sharpie. It read, "Veteran disabled. Thrown trash at by Officer Brent Mallory. Ask me why. Cars slowed. Some honked. Some looked away. But not all. Some stopped. A man gave me coffee. A woman in scrubs gave me her number. Said her brother was a reporter. And around noon, a silver Prius pulled up and out stepped a young man with dreadlocks and a GoPro strapped to his chest. 'You Roman?' he asked. I nodded. 'Good. My name's Leon. I run a channel, Justice Lens. I'm gonna tell your story.' And so it began. The camera was small, but its eye was sharp. Leon adjusted the GoPro on his chest, then crouched. So we were eye level. 'Tell me what happened, Mr. Roman. No filters. Just truth.' He didn't rush me. Didn't coach me. Just let the silence draw out like a warm-up before battle. And when I finally spoke, I didn't just tell him what happened. I told him everything. I told him about the trash. The smirk. The silence from everyone else. I told him about the boy who hesitated with his phone. The officer who looked away, the soda leaking like a slow insult. But more than that, I told him about what it felt like. The weight. The shame. The fury I wasn't supposed to feel anymore. He didn't interrupt. He let the lens soak in the details. The crack in my voice, the glint of sunlight on my chair's armrest, the way my fingers curled tighter every time I remembered the officer's laugh. "Why do you think he did it?" Leon asked softly. "Why you?" "Because he could," I answered. "Because this city lets him." Leon didn't argue. He just nodded, stood, and said, "I'll be back." By sunset, the video was online. It didn't take long. 2 hours and 3,000 views. People were commenting, some furious, some disbelieving. "This can't be real. Who the hell throws trash at a veteran, name and badge now?" By morning, it was on the front page of Justice Lens's YouTube channel, "Black Veteran Publicly Humiliated by Local Cop. Speaks Out." There was my face, my sign, my voice. And suddenly, I wasn't just Isaac Roman, the quiet man in the wheelchair from Auburn Street. I was the veteran who had had enough. But with the attention came the firestorm. By noon, Officer Brent Mallory's name was trending locally. The video had been shared on Facebook, Twitter, even on the city subreddit. Calls flooded the precinct. Angry voicemails, media inquiries, demands for comment. And then, just as I expected, the denial came. He was blocking traffic, the department spokesperson said. The officer was addressing a safety concern. Not a word about the trash. Not a word about the humiliation. Just spin, just protocol. But the video told the truth, and the city knew it. That day, I received a call from a woman named Grace Alvarez, head of the local Civil Liberties Union chapter. Her voice was sharp, efficient, but warm. "Mr. Roman, would you be willing to testify if we open a formal inquiry?" I paused. Testify again. After all these years, another fight, another room where I'd be spoken over, doubted, dismissed. But then I thought about my father, about the scars across his knuckles from Birmingham, about the way he used to say, "Boy, don't let quiet be your prison." "I'll testify," I said. 3 days later, I found myself wheeling into the city council chamber for a public meeting. The room was packed. Reporters, locals, veterans. I hadn't seen in years. And sitting at the far end of the bench, arms crossed, face blank, was Officer Mallory. He hadn't been suspended. Not even placed on leave, just called in to observe while the city gathered facts. A woman in a blue pantsuit stepped up to the mic. "Mr. Roman, thank you for being here. Please, for the record, can you confirm the date and time of the incident?" I answered clearly. Calmly, I told them what happened, how it felt, how the officer never once identified a crime, just mocked and degraded. I kept my tone level. I didn't raise my voice, but my words hit like thunder. Then they asked for the video to be played. And there it was, on the screen behind me. Officer Mallory stepping out of his cruiser, tossing the bag, sneering. The room went silent. But then something broke that silence. A voice, small but sharp, from the back row. I saw it too. Heads turned. A teenage boy stood up. It was the same kid who'd hesitated with his phone that day. "I was there." He said, "I didn't do anything. I was scared. But I saw it. I saw everything." He threw the trash. He laughed. Mr. Roman didn't do nothing. The crowd murmured. Grace Alvarez turned to the council. "With this corroboration, I formally request an independent investigation into Officer Mallory's conduct and a full review of complaints tied to his patrol history. The mayor, an aging man with a comb-over, and a reputation for riding the political fence cleared his throat. We'll take it under advisement. But the people weren't having it. They stood, not in chaos, not with yelling. They just stood one by one, silent, a dozen, then 2 dozen, then the entire chamber, standing for me and Officer Mallory. He sat still, jaw tight, eyes darting. For the first time he looked small. He looked exposed. That night, as I wheeled out into the summer evening, Leon caught up to me outside. "You feel like justice is coming?" he asked. I thought for a long moment. "No," I said. "I feel like the truth just walked into the room, and now it's gonna decide who survives the fire." We stood there under the street lamp watching the town move. People were talking, pointing, whispering. Some stopped to thank me. One woman cried, and I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every quiet man who had been pushed too far, every decorated veteran called a liar, every Black American told to stay in line. They had thrown trash at me, but they forgot the uniform beneath my skin. 3 days after the hearing, I received a letter, not from the city, not from the police department, but from the Office of Internal Affairs. Thick envelope embossed seal. I held it in my lap for a long time before opening it, fingers trembling, not with fear, but with a rising heat that had lived too long beneath the surface. Inside was a single sheet typed and formal. They were launching an internal investigation, not because they wanted to, because they had to, because now too many people had seen, too many had stood, too many were watching. And the name on the bottom of the letter, Captain Darnell Briggs. The highest-ranking officer in the division, Black veteran, and known for being the man nobody could intimidate. The irony was thick enough to cut with a bayonet. When I arrived at the station for the formal interview, the receptionist looked up and blinked twice before whispering, "It's you." She didn't say it with sarcasm. She said it with something else. Recognition, maybe even remorse. She pointed to the elevator, 4th floor. I wheeled in alone. The hum of the building sounded different now, like it knew a reckoning had arrived, like the walls had secrets and they were about to be dragged out into light. Captain Briggs met me at the door of his office. He was a large man, silver streaks in his close-cut hair. Eyes, sharp uniform, crisp. He extended a hand immediately, firm grip. "Sergeant Roman," he said. "No pretense. I've read the reports. I've seen the footage. And I want you to know I served in Basra. I understand what you gave. I won't let that be disrespected here." He motioned for me to wheel in, and for the next hour I answered every question. Clear, measured, truthful, I told them about the flowers, the trash, the way Mallory's voice sounded when he mocked me, the lack of citation, the smirk, the partner who stayed silent. I gave names, dates, sidewalk angles. I gave them everything. Captain Briggs leaned forward near the end. "Did you know," he said, "that this isn't the first complaint against Officer Mallory?" I nodded. I suspected. He slid a file across the desk, redacted names, multiple citations, but none of them stuck. Witnesses retracted. Evidence disappeared. And nobody as visible as you spoke. "Until now," I said. He met my eyes until now. A knock came at the door. A junior officer stepped in, face pale, clipboard in hand. "Sir, there's been an incident." Officer Mallory, he confronted a local journalist at the diner. Got aggressive, It's on tape." Briggs exhaled. "Leon," I asked. The young officer nodded. "Yes, sir." "He filmed the whole thing." I gritted my teeth. Of course he did. An hour later, I was sitting with Leon at his place, a small loft above a pawnshop, walls covered in posters from protests, art and justice quotes. He replayed the clip on his laptop. There was Mallory, standing too close. Voice raised, eyes wild. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Mallory sneered. "You think filming old men in chairs makes you a journalist?" Leon didn't even blink. He just said, "I think the world deserves the truth." And Mallory. He slapped the phone from Leon's hand. The screen went dark, but it was enough. That video, too, went viral. Within 24 hours, Mallory meltdown was trending. National news picked it up. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, even politicians started to speak. And suddenly, the city couldn't hide anymore. By the weekend, Officer Brent Mallory had been placed on administrative leave pending formal charges. But that wasn't the victory. Not yet, because while the city scrambled to save face, I was being called names online. Fake vet, professional victim, race hustler. They dug into my past. They published my old address. Some even said I threw the trash myself for attention. But I didn't bend, because I had something they didn't: integrity. And then came the twist. Late one night, my door buzzed. I wheeled over, half expecting more reporters. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Officer Cole, the silent partner from that day. He stood there in plain clothes. No badge. No belt. Just him holding a flash drive in his hand. "I shouldn't be here," he said. But I couldn't sleep. Not after what I saw. What I let happen. He handed me the drive. "What is it?" I asked. "The dash cam." He said, "The original one. Not the one they tried to edit later. This is the real one. With audio, it proves everything. Even what Mallory said after you rolled away." I took it slowly. "Why now?" "Because I was a coward," he whispered. "But my son asked me this morning if all cops were like Mallory, and I realized I can't let that be true." I watched the footage that night. Mallory alone in the car after I left, laughing to himself, saying, "One less cripple rolling around. Maybe he'll get hit next time." The words echoed like gunshots. I knew then the city couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. The truth wasn't just alive. It was armed, and it was coming. By dawn, the footage was scheduled. Leon uploaded the dashcam file with a timestamp overlay legal watermark and the bold title, "Unedited Police." Dashcam cop mocks disabled veteran after trash incident. No music, no commentary. Just raw truth in 1080p. Within 3 hours it hit 500,000 views. By the time the mayor called an emergency press conference, it had climbed past 1-2 million. I wasn't watching it from a screen. I was sitting in the front row of City Hall. The room was different now. There was no smug silence, no glances pretending not to see me. This time, the council shifted nervously. Journalists whispered into earpieces. People I had never met nodded at me, like we shared something sacred. Captain Briggs sat behind me, arms crossed, gaze locked on the podium like a soldier waiting for a signal. And then he walked in, Mayor Chesterfield. His usual lazy confidence had cracked. He cleared his throat. "We are aware of the video released this morning. We are disturbed. We are investigating fully." He tried to pivot. Tried to throw vague words like procedure, reform and public concern into the air like rice at a wedding, but this wasn't a wedding. It was a reckoning. I wheeled up to the mic. He hadn't invited me to speak. I didn't care. "Mr. Mayor," I said, my voice steady. "How many incidents does it take before someone like me matters in this city? How many reviews does it take before someone like Brent Mallory loses his badge?" He looked like a boy caught stealing Mr. Roman. "This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I said. "You know why. Because for years that badge has been used as a weapon, not a shield. And I have bled for this country, but I have never bled for the right to be humiliated on the sidewalk of my own city." The room broke into applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that shook walls. The kind that told me I wasn't alone. The mayor stammered. We will convene a special disciplinary hearing effective immediately." Too late. Because while he was talking, the state attorney general's office issued a statement. An independent criminal probe into Officer Mallory's conduct and the handling of internal complaints is now underway. And then came the unthinkable. Brent Mallory resigned, not because he wanted to, because he had to. The footage. The coverage. The silence of his colleagues. The walls were closing in, and there was no one left to lie for him. But this story wasn't just about one man. It was about the rot, and the people who let it grow. So we didn't stop. Veterans groups flooded the city council with petitions. Civil rights attorneys pushed for an overhaul of complaint tracking. Former officers stepped forward, admitting they too had witnessed unchecked power. And quietly, Officer Cole, the man who once stood silent, testified before the grand jury. His words simple but deadly. I feared the system more than the man beside me, and the system listened. It had no choice. 2 weeks later, I was invited back to the chamber not as a witness, not as a victim, but as a speaker. They handed me the floor. I looked around, faces I didn't know. Some who once avoided my gaze. Some who'd stood with me since day one. "I'm not here," I began, "because I enjoy the spotlight. I'm here because it should never take a camera for a black man in a wheelchair to be treated with decency." I looked to the back of the room where kids from the community center were sitting cross-legged watching. They were the reason. I want a city where service is respected, not because of medals but because of humanity. I want cops who protect the broken, not laugh at them. I want a city where a man can hold sunflowers and not be turned into trash. The applause didn't come from sympathy. It came from change. As I wheeled out, a young officer, fresh-faced nervous smile saluted me. I didn't return it. I nodded, because a salute is earned. And maybe, just maybe, we were building a city that remembered how to earn it again. They said it wouldn't go to court, that it would be swept under internal policy like so many others. But the evidence was undeniable. The dash cam, the civilian video, the testimony from Officer Cole, it was too loud to ignore. The district attorney filed formal charges against Brent Mallory, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and conduct. Unbecoming of a law enforcement officer, it wasn't just symbolic. It was historic. Our city had never put one of its own on trial like this before. And they didn't just subpoena me as a witness. They asked me to lead the opening statement as a character testimony. They wanted my voice to be the first thing the jury heard. It had been over 30 years since I last took a stand under oath. Back then, it was in uniform, testifying on behalf of a fellow soldier who had been framed for something he didn't do. I remembered how cold the air felt in those rooms, how heavy the truth seemed until it left your mouth. This time was no different. When I rolled into the courtroom that morning, the room was already packed. News crews lined the hallway, protesters on both sides held signs outside. One read, "Honor Vets," another, "Not all cops." But inside it was silent. No noise, just tension so thick it stuck to your lungs. Brent Mallory sat at the defendant's table, still trying to play the hero. Pressed white shirt. Tie knotted too tight. Jaw clenched like he could bite the truth in half. But his eyes, they betrayed him. No more arrogance, just fear wearing a mask of defiance. The judge was a woman named Eliza Fremont. Middle-aged, sharp, unimpressed with theatrics. She nodded at me. "Mr. Roman, when you're ready." I looked at the jury. 12 strangers whose faces blended into a single blur of curiosity and caution. Then I looked at Mallory. And then I spoke. I didn't come here today for revenge. I said I came for respect, not just for me. For every man and woman who wears this country's scars, visible or not. On July 3rd, I was humiliated. Not by a teenager. Not by a drunk stranger. By a man wearing the badge of the law. He didn't see a veteran. He didn't see a citizen. He saw someone he could degrade without consequence. I took a breath. But I am not here to beg. I am here to remind you what we tolerate becomes our legacy. I told them about the moment the trash hit my feet, about how Mallory mocked me, about the silence of his partner and the stain it left on a city that calls itself free. I showed them the flag I carried in my lap that day, folded tight, tucked into my vest. A flag I bled for. A flag Mallory spit on without ever laying a hand on it. Then came the footage. The raw dash cam, now admissible with full transcript. The court listened as Mallory's voice filled the speakers. One less cripple rolling around. Maybe he'll get hit next time. The courtroom didn't breathe. The silence was sacred. Mallory's attorney tried to argue mental fatigue. Said it was a bad day. Claimed my presence had been deliberately provocative. But the jury didn't flinch. Then Officer Cole took the stand. He didn't dramatize. He didn't cry. He just told the truth. I watched it happen. I didn't stop it. I was afraid of retaliation, but I knew it was wrong. The courtroom felt like a furnace burning with shame truth, and the slow realization that silence had made men like Mallory untouchable for too long. On the fourth day, closing arguments were made. The DA didn't shout. She didn't need to. She looked the jury in the eye and said, "You don't just serve justice for Isaac Roman. You serve it for every quiet man who thought his pain wasn't enough to matter." And then it went to deliberation. 3 hours later, they returned. Guilty, all counts. Mallory didn't speak, didn't cry, just sat there as the gavel fell and the city took its first breath of accountability in years. Outside, the press exploded. People asked for interviews. Networks called veteran groups cheered. But I didn't linger. I went home, to the small apartment on Auburn Street, to my quiet chair and my folded flag. I sat in silence, not because I was defeated, but because I finally didn't have to raise my voice. Justice had spoken for me. They say the courtroom is where justice happens, but they're wrong. Justice doesn't live in buildings. It doesn't wear robes. It walks on pavement, on crutches, in wheelchairs. It marches on legs that tremble but keep moving forward. And 2 weeks after the verdict, our city witnessed something it had never seen before. A march that began with silence and ended with thunder. It was Leon's idea, not just a protest. He said a tribute. Let's show them what respect looks like when it marches down Main Street. He reached out to every veterans organization, every civil rights group, every school and food bank and church that had ever been touched by what we did. Within days, over 3,000 people pledged to show up. They didn't come to riot. They came to walk for dignity. The morning of the march, I dressed in my cleanest button-down, the one I wore for my daughter's graduation. I tucked the folded flag into my lap, placed my bronze star beside it, and wheeled to the front of the crowd. Behind me were veterans in full-dress uniform parents, holding hands with their children, clergy, bus drivers, sanitation workers, lawyers, and teachers, all walking together, one message strong. We will not be mocked. We will not be erased. News cameras lined the sidewalks, but no one performed. No one shouted slogans for attention. We didn't need to. The signs said enough. Respect isn't optional. Black disabled veteran, still human service deserves dignity. As we passed the spot where Mallory had thrown that greasy bag of garbage at me, someone had chalked a message on the sidewalk. The ground remembers. I paused. I looked down at that faded patch of concrete and whispered, "So do I." We reached City Hall at noon. There, on the steps, stood Captain Briggs, Officer Cole, and, surprisingly, the mayor. Not behind a podium, not guarded, just standing, waiting. And for the first time since this all began, he looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Roman, would you speak to them?" I wheeled forward. No speech in my hand, no script, just the flag and the city that finally stopped looking away. "I don't need a microphone to be heard anymore," I said, "because for the first time you're actually listening." The crowd murmured. "I'm not here to celebrate one man being convicted. I'm here because for every step we took today, there are thousands more we didn't take before, and we have to start walking them now." I looked to the veterans behind me. To those who served, we are not symbols. We are not props. We're men and women who carried burdens, so this country could carry its conscience. Don't ever forget that. I turned to the crowd. To the kids watching, the world may ignore your pain, but never let it silence your voice. Then I held up the flag just once, arms trembling from the weight of everything it meant, and whispered, "You don't get to spit on this, not anymore." Applause. No, something better. Stillness, a reverent hush. The kind that comes when people finally see what was always in front of them. And then Officer Cole stepped beside me. He looked to the people, then to me, and without a word, he reached down, unpinned his department badge from his chest, and held it out. "I don't want this back," he said, "but I want it to mean something again." He placed it in my palm. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Then I turned and pinned it on the folded flag. It wasn't forgiveness. It was accountability wrapped in hope. The mayor stepped forward. "Mr. Roman, the city would like to dedicate a permanent monument in the town square. To you, to every veteran who was overlooked, and to the truth that can no longer be denied." I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I looked back at the children in the crowd. "Build it small," I said, "but make sure the words are big enough for kids to read." That night I sat by my window watching the quiet city hum. Not perfect, not healed, but finally awake. It's been 6 months. 6 months since the trash hit my feet. 6 months since I chose not to pick it up, but to pick a fight for something bigger than my pride. I sit now in a wheelchair on freshly poured concrete beneath a small marble monument in the town square. Not a grand statue, not a towering bronze likeness, just a low stone wall, waist high with a bronze plate that reads, "In honor of those who served with dignity and were met with silence. May this city never look away again." Below it, etched into the base, are 4 words that changed everything. You don't know me. Every afternoon, kids from the nearby school pass by it. Some stop. Some run their fingers along the letters. Some ask questions. And now someone answers them. Not with shame. Not with denial. With truth. The monument sits across from the bench where I read every Friday. Still got my sunflowers. Still got my folded flag beside me. Still got the bronze star tucked into my shirt pocket like a secret. Only the soil understands. But now I've got something else too. Community. People who once avoided my gaze now sit beside me. A barista named Chris brings me free coffee every morning. Miss Elaine's flower stand was moved closer to the square. The young boy who recorded part of that fateful encounter now helps Leon edit videos. And Officer Cole. He didn't go back to the force. He runs a nonprofit now. Silent, no more training rookies to see people. Not profiles. As for Brent Mallory, he never apologized. He moved 3 counties over after the sentencing, stripped of his badge, his pension, and most of all, his anonymity. But I never wanted his downfall. I wanted the system that made him feel invincible to be broken. And now cracks run through every wall that once protected men like him. The city implemented mandatory bias training. Every officer now wears a body cam with footage reviewed monthly by a citizens board. I sit on complaints are tracked in a public database. And most importantly, officers with prior misconduct aren't protected by silence anymore. That silence was always the true villain. People keep asking if I've forgiven him. I always answer the same way: forgiveness is a door. But it doesn't open until the lock of accountability clicks. So far, I'm still holding the key, but not out of bitterness, out of discipline, because forgiveness without justice is just a bandage over a bullet wound. And I've seen enough of those. Veterans across the country wrote to me. Some sent letters. Some sent their own stories. One man, missing both legs, said, "I've been invisible for 20 years, until you stood up without standing." I wept when I read that, because I realized the most powerful stand I ever took was the one where I stayed seated. And now, each day, I roll through this city. I feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace I earned, not because the fight is over, but because I know I'm not fighting alone anymore. The final time Leon interviewed me, he asked if you could speak to your younger self before the war, before the chair, before the bag of trash. What would you say? I looked right into the lens and said, "One day they'll try to throw garbage on your name. Let them, because one day you'll show them what grows from it." As I finish writing this, the wind picks up. It's gentle today. The sun is warm. The kids are laughing across the square, and beside me, the flag I carry unfolded now flutters quietly, not in mourning, not in protest, but in promise. A promise that dignity isn't just something we remember, it's something we defend. Sometimes the most powerful stand you'll ever take is the one where you refuse to bow to injustice, even if you're seated in a wheelchair. This story wasn't just about a man disrespected, it was about a community waking up, about silence finally breaking, about a flag that didn't need to fly to remind the world it still stands for something. In a world where cruelty is often overlooked and power misused, remember, this dignity doesn't come from titles, uniforms, or noise. It comes from truth, courage, and refusing to be forgotten. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it made you feel, don't stay silent. Comment below, share your thoughts, your outrage, your hope. Subscribe to the channel to stand with stories that deserve to be heard. Like the video if justice still matters to you. And share it because the more people who see the truth, the fewer places it can be buried. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder, sometimes the most broken man becomes the loudest voice for change.